Today, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the interior of my upcoming book, Band Orchestration, Volume 2, Woodwinds. I'm going to take an in-depth look at just one chapter of the upcoming book. That chapter I'm just about finished with. It's a chapter on all the different sizes of clarinets. With the clarinets, we will have 5 different chapters. The first will be just on general information and history. The second is on technique of the clarinet. The third is on the different members, which we'll look at in this video. The fourth one is all the different possible combinations of clarinets that we can find in orchestra or band. And then the fifth chapter is on extended techniques. The chapter we're looking at today on the Clarinet Family is one of the largest chapters in the book. Currently it sits at 51 pages and just under 12,000 words. This is going to go up because I'm still lacking most of the photographs for this chapter. I have a photo shoot scheduled for sometime next week to get all the remaining members of the Clarinet family, with the exception of a couple of the very rare ones like A-flat and D clarinets, which I hopefully have lined up. So let's take a look at the beginning of the chapter. Most chapters concerning the various members of the instrument families will be broken up into 2 sections. The first section is the commonly found members in the band, and then the second part is the less common instruments, rare instruments we find in the band. However, with clarinets, I can't do that because so many of the clarinets are paired together. The B-flat and the A clarinet need to be thought of together. So in this chapter, I go in score order from the highest clarinet we'll ever find to the lowest clarinet we'll ever find. This is a deviation from the rest of the book. So let's start at the very beginning. We start off with the A-flat clarinet, the smallest clarinet we'll ever see. And we talk about the range. Like with all instruments, I give the name in other languages. So German, Italian, French, and Spanish. And then a discussion on the use and history of the instrument. With the A-flat clarinet, I also briefly talk about the G clarinet, which is sometimes seen. Then I give examples of its use in the literature. So for the A-flat clarinet, I scoured high and low looking for pieces. And what I've come up with are a couple of examples from Verdi's La Traviata, where he uses the A-flat clarinet in the stage band. In fact, Verdi uses not only the A-flat clarinet, he uses the G clarinet. So I include a passage from the A-flat clarinet and a passage from the G clarinet. The next clarinet I talk about is the F clarinet. You probably haven't heard of the F clarinet because it's extinct. The last F clarinet was probably made 120 to 150 years ago. They just don't exist anymore. But why I include it is that we find parts for it in older band music. Mendelssohn used it. In fact, even Beethoven used it in some of his band works. Yes, Beethoven wrote band works if you didn't know. So I include that just as a historical perspective. Then we move on to the E-flat clarinet. This is a commonly found instrument in bands. So I have to go into more detail on this instrument. With the E-flat clarinet, again, we start out the very same. We give the range, we give languages. We talk a little bit about the history, the usage. And I give far more excerpts here. But one thing I also do is I talk about its use by students. What is a student going to be expected to do on this instrument? And with all the commonly found instruments, this is a necessity. We need to talk about students because band, 90% of the time, is a student medium. So let's talk about how it's going to be used most of the time, not just in a professional setting. After the E-flat clarinet, we go to the D clarinet. And briefly touch on it, its use, and then we get to an interesting section where I compare 2 paired instruments. The E-flat and the D clarinet are considered a pair. So it should go that we need to talk about their comparison to one another. Now the D clarinet is very rare. We rarely see it. In fact, I don't know if I've ever actually seen one in person. We talk about the difference in tonal characteristics, and I've even found one example from the literature of an instance where both the E-flat and the D clarinet are used together in a single passage from Rimsky-Korsakov's Mlada. Next we move on to the C clarinet. And you can see by the image on the screen that with the C clarinet, I already have photographs in place, so you can see much more of the final look of what will be here. We'll talk about the C clarinet in detail. It's used mostly in orchestra music, though rarely used in band. Then we move on to the big B-flat clarinet. This is the most important instrument in the clarinet section, possibly the most important instrument in the modern band. And I go into a lot of detail here, but because it's the instrument that we compare every other clarinet to, there's nothing to base it on because this is the instrument by which all others are compared. So there's not a lot of special detail that can be gone into with the B-flat clarinet. It's not higher in pitch than the B-flat clarinet because it is the B-flat clarinet. I give a lot of examples here. In fact, I still have a few more examples to put in. I've got a passage from DeMay's Lord of the Rings symphony that I've got to get in place. I'm just waiting to actually get a score from the publisher. And I give almost a dozen orchestral excerpts for the B-flat clarinet. Then we move on to the A clarinet, and we talk about its use. Note that the A clarinet is very rarely used in bands, but it can happen. We talk about the Basset clarinet in this section as well, which is an A clarinet that's just been extended down to low C. We give some excerpts, and then we have a comparison section between the B-flat clarinet and the A clarinet. Talk about their use, how they're different tonally, technically, and give an excerpt that uses both in contrast to each other. Next, we move on to the very rare G clarinet. You can see that we already have a photo in place of the G clarinet. There's an actual excerpt here from Mozart, who used the G clarinet in one piece. Then we move on to the Basset horn, or the F alto clarinet, as sometimes it's known. Same process here. Lots of excerpts, lots of detail. Then we move on to the E-flat alto clarinet, sometimes known as an E-flat tenor clarinet. Same thing. Then there's a section comparing the alto clarinet and the Basset horn. Talks about how they're different, how they can both be used in combination. Then on to the bass clarinet. We spend a lot more time on the bass clarinet. We talk about student usage as well as professional usage, something I also do with the B-flat clarinet and the alto clarinet, because those are commonly found in student ensembles. There's a brief section on the bass clarinet in A, which is no longer seen anymore, but will pop up from time to time in orchestral literature. Then on to the contra-alto clarinet and the contrabass clarinet. Both of these I've scoured to find as many examples as I can, but dealing mostly with public domain works, it becomes a lot harder. With the contra-alto clarinet, I've had to make the decision that every example here actually comes from compositions of my own hand. Because in public domain, there's a single example of the contra-alto clarinet being used, and that example is a single note. Not really helpful for an orchestral excerpt. Finally, we end up with the two rarest clarinets, the octo-contra-alto and the octo-contrabass, which are included here only for completeness sake. This should give you some overview of the amount of detail that is going into this book. It's, like I say, a massive text. This chapter alone is over 50 pages. I have over 110 pages right now on just clarinets alone, making this the most comprehensive and most detailed orchestration text on woodwinds ever compiled. If you are at all interested in helping out this project, please go to the GoFundMe campaign. The link is down below, and I hope to get this book out as soon as I possibly can. I'm aiming for September 1st to be completed with everything, but of course life could get in the way between now and then. I will give regular updates both on my professional Facebook page, which will be linked down below, as well as on the GoFundMe campaign. And again, thanks so much for watching, and thank you for supporting.